All right, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing time so far. Our next speaker is Kristen Summers. She is a distinguished engineer, cloud and cognitive expert labs at IBM. Please join me in welcoming Kristen to our virtual stage.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining me. Um, so if you're here, you're probably interested in what AI can do for you and how an practical application of AI can help your business. And I'm here to talk with you about that. But first, let's set the stage because AI is a very broad technical field, including technology that's applicable to many things, and different applications trend differently. So next slide. Let's talk about trends in customer service. The past year has forced many enterprise companies to embrace digital transformation. And make no mistake, this is a lasting change. If you can build, according to Forrester, digital customer service interaction will continue to increase by 40% this year. To quote Forrester analyst Ian Jacobs, he says, "The pandemic created a trend, an increased reliance on online shopping, digital financial services, and telehealth or virtual care options. And that genie ain't going back in the bottle. The lack of in-person services forced many consumers to use digital channels to interact with brands, and consumers will continue using these channels." So just to share about myself, like many people in the pre-pandemic world, I was acclimated to mixing online and real world experiences. I might shop online sometimes, get my bank balance online sometimes, and then at other times go to a brick and mortar location. But now I'm much more likely to go digital first. After months of interacting with brands only online, I'm just more inclined to deposit a check online than go to a local branch location, or to do a return through a web portal rather than going to a store. And, that makes sense. So if we go to the next slide, as the face-to-face business landscape remains uncertain, giving customers digital access to your company is really table stakes. To compete, you have to have an online portal for customers to access your goods and services. And I mean, as the pandemic continues to surge in different parts of the world, lockdown measures are still being imposed. And so businesses are operationalizing digital strategies that they put in place over the last year to support healthy employees, safe customer interactions, and sustained workplace operations. So if we go to the next slide and build it out, over 70% of consumer product companies and over 80% of retailers have taken these actions. For example, they're establishing new processes to minimize operational disruption, which will keep things running if some kind of disruption does occur. And consumer companies are focusing on building IT resilience across the enterprise in response to a much more distributed IT landscape. So what that means, if we go to the next slide, is that digital innovation around the world has dramatically accelerated, and customers have never been more empowered than in this moment. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, a customer can reach out for assistance at any time. And the company that succeeds is the company that's there to help them right then when they need it. The company that thrives is the one that provides efficient and personal service. So on the next slide, you'll see a staggering 91% of unsatisfied customers will not return to a business that disappoints them. Those are the stakes. Remember, your customers are always plugged in, and if you're unable to efficiently and successfully fulfill their needs, they'll probably find someone who can. Customer expectations aren't really peer-to-peer anymore. You're not competing solely with your direct market competitor. You're competing with any other brand whose customer service may be better than yours. So moving on to the next slide, I know what you're probably thinking now. Well, yeah, the stakes are high, but how can AI help? When do we get to that part? Okay, so now we're going to talk about that. The proper implementation of AI technology can allow customers to address many of their needs without ever even having to talk with a live agent. So you can see why it's taking such a firm hold. And if this change is unavoidable, and it really is, because technology very rarely moves backward, then it behooves companies to do it right the first time. I want to help you understand why leading organizations are seeing success with AI and how that translates into both a better customer experience and lower operational costs. Because understanding what AI is good for can help understand why it's finding such a place within leading organizations. So if we go to the next slide, let's talk about a concrete example. Cardinal Health Inc. is a global healthcare services company. Its mission is to remove healthcare complexities and bring scaled solutions to help customers thrive in a changing world. And Cardinal Health has implemented 2 AI initiatives to improve agent and customer experiences and bring that mission statement to life. This was one of the many businesses who had to pivot to a new way of working during the pandemic. In March 2020, they suddenly saw an uptick in customer orders and inquiries. Healthcare facilities and other frontline workers needed additional tools and supplies, and they looked to Cardinal to help. And at the same time, Cardinal, like most businesses, was also figuring out how to navigate the pandemic themselves and how to keep their workers safe and all of that. And they saw an opportunity to scale AI. Cardinal Health had previously deployed Watson Assistant to help their agents rapidly troubleshoot IT issues. And now they built on that success, evolving their AI initiative to help clients get crucial up-to-date information on their orders. So what Cardinal Health was able to do was stand up a new customer-facing use case that used about 80% of the original code for their conversational agent. And that meant they had a successful test case up and running in 5 days, and they saw results in 3 weeks. And this is just one of many examples of organizations who pivoted successfully during the pandemic. And we'll revisit their story a little bit later in the presentation. But going to the next slide and taking a step back, we want to come back to the question of why leading organizations are seeing success with AI and how that gives them a better customer experience and lower operational costs. Because again, understanding what AI is good for can help understand why it's finding a place in leading organizations. So let's start with something pretty basic. It's an AI use case that you're probably highly familiar with, and in fact, you've probably interacted with recently. So if we go to the next slide, at its basic level, AI is excellent at finding and retrieving information. And that means that a great place for any enterprise to start its AI journey is with a simple virtual AI assistant that helps get information that's responsive to common inquiries. These kinds of assistants have been used to significant effect in many industries: banking, retail, healthcare, the public sector, travel and transportation, and so much more. And they give you fundamental self-services like information retrieval, as I mentioned. Seen this used in companies to help both customers and agents. This kind of virtual agent uses natural language understanding and machine learning to understand the vocabulary of the domain that it's being deployed in, which means that customers can express themselves conversationally and naturally. They don't have to change the way they're talking in order to interact with the agent. And that's what's really important for making it usable. And once you have that basic virtual assistant in place, then you also do need to focus on the customer experience and personalize it. Today's companies need to create customer journeys that engender the affinity and trust that can lead to even customer love. And digital transformation should bolster a human connection with your customers, not reduce it. And so to do that, you really need an orchestrated approach to the experience you're designing that's customer-centric and that employees can embrace. And the good news about that is this kind of virtual assistant is very easy to train and personalize using the data that you probably already have in-house. And those kinds of efforts have a marked improvement on customer satisfaction. So once you've done that, if we go to the next slide, what's step 2? The next thing that leading companies do is to scale the use case out a bit. Once you have something up and running, you'll have insights into other areas where AI can help your business. And what many organizations do, and we find typical for the next step, is to stick close to that original use case, but expand it a bit. You may scale it out across channels and, in a sense, create a virtual contact center to assist and augment your live agents, which might mean integrating the AI solution into your IVR or implementing a voice bot that customers can interact with over the phone, where you really get sort of a first line of self-service before pulling in your customer experts. You can also, in this next step as you're expanding, add some backend integration, and that can give you greater personalization. You can go fetch information about the individual customer and have the response reflect that. Or have that integration take actions. It's still largely a self-service option used to streamline tedious and repetitive tasks, but it can also bring to bear information that's found from broader sources, such as collections of documents or databases. So in order to do any of these things, a critical component is finding AI that can plug into existing systems, such as your existing CRM system, or work within your existing customer-facing workflow. It's really not realistic to expect customers and agents to radically change their behavior. And so if you find an AI solution that fits directly within the customer-facing workflow that you have, that can really increase, or rather reduce, your time to value. That can really speed up your time to value. And then if we move to the next slide, step 3. Once you've done that, the next step is to bring in additional types of AI. This is where you're really adding more power and in some sense recalibrating your use of AI to make it more of an insights machine. The ability of AI to find the right information has found great use in a variety of areas. And in customer service, it can provide case resolving information to live agents at the start of a call, helping them to resolve issues much more quickly and efficiently. And of course, also, AI is often used to find patterns and make connections at speed and at scale. So when you apply AI and data science techniques to the data that's pouring in from customer logs and wider corpora, leading businesses can take those insights and apply them to make the business better. That may mean improving customer service, finding patterns and friction points there to address as you look at the patterns of what's happening in your customer service logs. But it also may mean looking for patterns in those customer service contacts and finding things that remove those root causes in the first place. Can address all of those things. And that's really where machine learning shines, because it allows businesses to perform analytics to find out what's happening moment to moment in their customer service journey and find and address speed bumps and challenges and also benefits and opportunities. All right, so moving to the next slide. Great. Suppose we've done all that. You've, as we call it, climbed the AI ladder. You've done this integration. What's next? We really view the final step as having an AI layer covering your whole enterprise. At this level, you have a 360-degree view of your customer. And you may need AI to get that 360-degree view, by the way, because you may need AI to resolve identities from different systems that hold customer information. So you have that in place, and you also have predictive models running on the data that's available about individual customers and more generally about your business. And what that can do is, for example, in the case of a customer satisfaction call, the AI can detect the context of the call and automatically look up previous customer records and information about them and suggest the next best course of action according to both the specifics of the call and the known history of that customer and their inferred preferences, and make recommendations so that really the AI and the human are working together to give your customers the best experience possible. So going to the next slide, as we talk about scaling out across the enterprise in step 4, we really also need to talk about scale. Some contact centers are already a hybrid virtual model, and that makes them better able to quickly adjust to volume and new customer concerns. Using AI, they can immediately scale operations to handle unanticipated workloads. And research suggests that AI's importance in the customer service context is likely to double in the next 3 years. So with the next slide, let's come back to Cardinal Health. And let's go ahead to the slide after that with the quote. In 2019, Jasmeet Singh, Director of Augmented Intelligence at Cardinal Health, spearheaded an AI use case to help their agents get IT help faster. He knew that AI-infused automation could improve the customer and the agent experience. He also knew that Cardinal Health needed to implement a virtual voice assistant that would aid the customer service experience and not disrupt it in any way. The way he puts it, you should be training your AI, but you should never be trying to train your customer or your end user. So his team was guided by that philosophy, and they studied their data looking for the right use case to apply AI to. And what they found was that 20% of incoming calls to their IT center were from internal agents seeking assistance with password resets. So this was a perfect opportunity. Cardinal Health's digital philosophy is think big, start small, and scale fast. And so that's exactly what they did. Singh and his team implemented Watson Assistant over their current telephone options. So directly over the options that callers were already choosing in their phone system. And what happens is that now callers who need to reset their password are directed to a virtual agent that assists them. And that frees up the Cardinal Health human agents to address much more complex IT issues. So that's a great example of letting the AI handle something that's well contained and specific, and let the humans handle something that's more complex. Now, then COVID-19 hit. And what happened was there was a new need. As I mentioned before, they had this influx of inquiries about the status of orders. So Singh's team took the technology they had developed to assist their IT department and scaled it out as a customer-facing assistant. And this time, Watson Assistant would answer questions about the status of orders of medical products and medicine. So they re-engineered the solution, but as I mentioned before, they were able to reuse about 80% of the original code to create their new conversational agent, which meant that they had a successful test case up and running in 5 days. They named the new AI assistant Chia, the Cardinal Health Intelligent Assistant. And when customers began to call in and speak with Chia, they got a satisfactory resolution to their issues in less than 2 minutes. And Cardinal Health didn't need to allocate any human agents. Chia handled the call volume independently. So now, if we go to the next slide, I want to reiterate that IBM and Cardinal Health share this similar philosophy regarding adopting and operationalizing AI. Think big, start small, and scale fast. So it was in looking at the data that Singh had his insight that Cardinal Health could assist agents and customers with the same technology. By starting small with an internal Watson assistant, voice assistant, Singh and his team could train it with the necessary skills and intents, and then they were able to grow beyond that use case. And when it was time to scale to a new workflow, they did that in the way that would help their customers the most. And by the way, Cardinal Health is continuing on their AI journey. They're excited for new developments in AI, and they're really exploring 2 upcoming AI capabilities. One is to use AI to speed up data wrangling and ingestion, and the other is to use process mining, which aids organizations in recognizing patterns faster and improving key metrics, allowing businesses to see results in weeks rather than months. So if we go to the next slide, you've seen the journey that most organizations take as they're adopting and scaling AI. And I want to talk through 5 of the most common and successful use cases that we see with our customers. The first is listed here as workload management. What I mean by that is digital labor can resolve routine queries without requiring any involvement from human agents. So you can really offload a lot of the workload quite frequently onto digital agents. The second is automation. And here, virtual agents can leverage machine learning in order to start and sometimes even complete tasks that need not doing, not just respond to common inquiries for particular information. Then when you do need to go to an agent, a common thing to do is to use smart routing so that AI can help the request get to the right place, the right agent, the right department who can help the most with what the customer is really looking to solve. And then as you go into that interaction with a live agent, a virtual agent can do pre-screening so that the customer interacts first with the agent to get common information that the human agent will need in order to solve the problem. And then that gets passed off to the live agent, so it reduces their time and their burden. And then finally, we can use Agent Assist, where totally unseen to the customer, the virtual agent is using AI to assist the live agent and provide things like perhaps suggested technical solutions or suggestions to resolve customer disputes and even opportunities to upsell. So if we go to the next slide, I've been talking about how valuable virtual agent technology is, but you don't have to take my word for it. A recent analysis from the IBM Institute for Business Value showed that virtual agents positively impact customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, and revenue, and that a very high percentage of respondents are achieving or expect to achieve their anticipated ROI. And if we build out the rest of the slide, The numbers really show that. 91% of respondents reported an increase in customer satisfaction due to using a virtual agent. And 96% of respondents have exceeded or achieved or expect to achieve their anticipated return on investment for their virtual agent technology implementation. So if we go to the next slide. All right, you're probably thinking now, that sounds great. I understand why AI works in these scenarios. I understand common use cases and benefits. I see that people are getting ROI. Well, how do I get started? So here are some next steps and best practices. So if we build, the first step is to start small. Gather your data and choose a clear, measurable customer service problem to address, and then build a solution to address it. Maybe it's an assistant to help your IT department with password resets, or maybe it's a virtual agent that helps the customer find the individual department or human agent that can help them the best. Whatever it is, if we build to the next, step 2 is to personalize it. Conversational AI is giving your business a voice that can communicate directly with your customers. Don't waste that opportunity. You want to use it. Make it sound like you and your brand. And what you'll discover as you go through these 2 steps is where your gaps are. As you do this process, you'll find what data you may be missing or whether some processes are inconsistent. And as you address that, you'll kind of have everything you need for how you do these things from your first solution. So it should then be easy to scale, which is great because that's step 3. If we build step 3, scale across your organization. In parallel with the other advancements you're making, once you have the experience, you can also continue to update the core AI. So you can both scale across your organization by addressing more use cases, and for the use cases that you have, you can expand what the AI is doing for them and increase the breadth of what it's doing for you in both those ways. Now, ultimately, of course, AI is not a magic job replacement tool. I did talk about reducing how much human effort there is, but it's not removing human effort. It needs human involvement and it needs training in order to work properly. So your implementation needs to focus on the human. You need to use your deployment to support and streamline processes and workflow for both your agents and your customers. And if you keep those simple steps in mind, you'll be well on your way to AI success. And if we go to the next slide, if you're interested in understanding how conversational AI can fit into your business's customer service strategy, you can set up a free no-pressure consultation with one of our AI experts who can help you map out the next steps for you. Thank you again so much for joining me today.
Wow, Kristen, thank you so much. That was amazing. And I know this virtual audience is giving you a huge virtual round of applause. If we can stop sharing the slides, I'm going to send the audience to their next session. So thank you again, Kristen. For the audience, it's time for you to make your way to your next session. Along the way, make sure you accept your connection request and take some time to check out our amazing exhibits. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.